Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Task-Driven to Value-Driven Business Analysis. I'm your host, Marlena Lombardi, and on behalf of IIBA, thanks for joining us today. Today's webinar is an IIBA public event. It is designed to deliver practical resources for you as you continue to hone your skill set and deliver value within your organization. When you join IIBA, you become a member of an international association dedicated to developing and promoting the business analysis profession, with access to resources and community to support your development and career growth. At IIBA, we are all about uniting a community of professionals to create better business outcomes and to provide the tools to help you climb the ladder of success. And you being here today is a testament to just that. Today, our presenter, Tim Coventry. Tim is the CEO for Business Analysts, an expert business analysis company owned and operated in Australia, offering business analyst consultants for ASX-listed and private companies, government and not-for-profit organizations. With over 24 years experience and a strong contribution to business analysis across the globe, Tim is an acknowledged expert in his professional field. He has expertise in all phases of the solution delivery lifecycle with substantial practical experience in strategic analysis, business process analysis, requirements, tendering and evaluation, and software implementation. Tim has been a presenter at many conferences around the globe and participates regularly in IIBA forums. We are very happy to have him with us here today. I will just do some housekeeping a little bit. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the session, so please put in all your questions into the question box and we will try to answer all your questions. And with that, please welcome Tim Coventry.
Well, good evening everyone, or good morning, or maybe it's good afternoon to everyone here today. Today I'm going to talk about task-driven versus value-driven. Businesses can take advantage of value-driven approaches. Understanding an organization's strategic direction and key value streams enables the development and the delivery of portfolios of work that deliver products and services to customers more efficiently. Business analysis techniques can be used to trace the delivery of programs, projects, and business as usual to help uncover necessary areas of change to deliver the desired outcome and value. I'm talking today about value-driven business analysis. So what we're going to cover off today is we're going to talk about what is task-driven versus value-driven business analysis. We'll talk about how to start to move away from task-driven to more value-driven business analysis, and I'll introduce a concept around just enough business analysis. First off, I want to just set the scene, and setting the scene is really around what is business analysis. It's a very, very broad subject, and that's a great thing. It's encompassed by the 6 knowledge areas that BA bought. But business analysis, to me, is all about using proven methods to really improve business performance. This is about making sure that there's better products and services being delivered to customers. As I said, the breadth of business analysis is really quite large. Business analysis is all about elicitation, analysis, specifying, and then managing business needs, value, and requirements. requirements are just simply molecules that make up the delivery of products and services to customers. So no wonder business analysis is so broad when we're saying that requirements sit within every part of any organisation, whether it's a for-profit, a not-for-profit, or government agency. Requirements sit throughout the whole organisation. They are the granular molecules that make up the organisation. In today's world, we seem to be, I seem to feel, and maybe you do the same, that we're suddenly about this need for change. This change has suddenly come upon us, and the world is changing pretty quickly, and organisations need to change because they will face extinction if they simply don't change. But what I'm interested in is that really the truth? And I'm not too sure about this, but let's just look at some interesting facts. In 1980, Honda introduced 6 motorcycle models in a month. However, in comparison to today's day and age, the Apple MacBook has had 4 models in the last year. And I heard on the radio this morning, or driving into work, that today is 10 years since the first iPhone was introduced. So when you look at how quickly Honda was developing new models of motorcycles compared to what's happening in the MacBook, there seems to be a bit of a contradiction. It feels like we're living in this fast day and age, but history is showing us that in actual fact product life cycles are actually getting longer, not shorter. Employment tenure is actually increasing. So 10 years ago the average was 5 years, now it's 5.5 for over 24-year-olds. So we're actually increasing in tenure. And technology, to get technology into healthcare actually takes something like 17 years. And the last one, which I found really interesting, is that statistics is showing that the world is actually becoming safer, not more dangerous. So if you are traveling, if you're out and about, the world is actually statistically getting a safer place to live, not a more dangerous place to live. So what is it that is actually happening in the world that is making us feel as though we're moving really quickly, but when you look at the statistics, it's actually showing that in some cases this is not the case? Well, I believe that the media and social media has really played a big part of this, in that maybe some of the dangerous activities that occurred within the world we didn't used to hear about. We're able to get that news faster and quicker, and it seems like it's coming from lots of different directions, so we're feeling that things are really changing. I think the other thing, and you know, I'm not really wedded to this as being, you know, there isn't some sort of change happening in organisations. And I think where it's slightly having an impact is that in organisations we're actually starting to see the customer driving demand. Before, organisations were very much product based, and the customer ended up by having to come and deal with that organisation because it's selling a product. What I'm seeing is that in organisations there are alternatives, and customers are becoming more informed and more educated and are able to choose many different things. So we're becoming a lot better with our selection, and therefore customer experience is really important, that organisations are concentrating on what the customer experience is all about. So let's have a look at this. What do we mean by task-driven business analysis? Okay, well, really the definition around this is that it's around about completing particular tasks as a measure of success. So, you know, if I put that in a business analysis, typical business analysis type of engagement, and what that would mean in business analysis, well, typically we would concentrate on maybe some tasks and activities that contribute to a deliverable. So we might have things such as maybe a stakeholder matrix. So it would have been really important for us at the start of any engagement to create a stakeholder matrix. Now, I still believe that's still an important thing to do. Identify your stakeholders and really make sure that we're capturing some of their unique motivations as we go through a project. Other types of deliverables that we might have focused in as some sort of task activity might be in a workshop schedule. We might have looked at a whole series of activities and tasks that would contribute to a business requirement specification, or tasks and activities that concentrated and delivered a functional requirement specification. And we might have concentrated on tasks that contribute to maybe a tender specification that's being released out to vendors. Right? All of these activities are necessary activities that we need to do as a business analyst. And the focus of those would have been very much around the sign-off and completion of those deliverables. Now, I'm not saying that that's still not important, but where our focus is, I think, needs to change. So what is value-driven business analysis? So this is really understanding the worth, the importance, making sure that stakeholders are describing the value, and it's in context, or it always is going to be in some type of context. So it may be in relation to a product and service. And the product and service may have an end-to-end component, or it may be a constrained piece of the end-to-end value chain. It's really important that we understand the perspective of the stakeholder, where the value is going to sit. So moving towards value-driven business analysis is really about understanding where the activities that a business analyst would perform, where is the real value in that? What are the things that we do from a day-to-day perspective which actually drives incredible amount of value? My feeling is that business analyst does drive incredible value, and it's often that a business analyst is really the glue that puts all of these things together. It holds all the requirements, the molecules, all together, traces them in a unique way that allows people to make informed decisions about some of the issues and some of the opportunities that sit within delivering the products and services to customers. So what does that mean? What does it look like? Well, if we look back at our previous slide about task-driven, the emphasis may change to more value-driven. So instead of concentrating on the stakeholder matrix, then it's about concentrating on what is maybe the team's understanding of roles and responsibilities that might sit within a project? Does everybody understand what their role is? Can everybody articulate what other people's roles and responsibilities are? That may be where the real value sits, rather than just the creation of the actual stakeholder matrix. Maybe it's actually more important to drive that roles and responsibilities and understanding and get that to be completed by a team of people than you being the owner, keeper, and the only person that really understands that stakeholder matrix. Stakeholder matrix to me is still really important, but it's about shifting that thinking around where does the real value sit. And I see the real value sits in that the business really understands what are the really important components of business analysis and the value of business analysis as it sits. Another component that may be really important is, traceability, is how well does all of the team understand traceability? How do they actually utilize the skill of traceability, which is a unique skill to a business analyst? How do they utilize that skill to really help them to understand where all of the components of maybe a very complex piece of scope, how does that all fit together? And being able to see that, we're able to pull those concepts together. One of the things that I think is really useful to really start to drive out this value is the IABA BA-BOK core concept model. In version 3, the concept model was first introduced, and I think this was a really great way of understanding how value is offset against needs and has a direct relationship towards solutions, stakeholders, change, and the context upon which that value sits. If we look at the core concept model, we look at the different components. You'll see that in the blue we have changes, we have stakeholders, we have context. In the orange we have needs, we have solutions, and we have value. And the word value there is really important, because this is the component that we're actually trying to concentrate on. We're trying to concentrate on how do we make sure and maintain the value from a business need that involves stakeholders that may have a solution that will make the business need or improve the products and services being delivered to customers. But constantly those things will change, and it's important that as a business analyst we concentrate on always looking back at what the value is going to be. How do we ensure that the value sits within the project team and then is finally delivered into the organisation to solve an issue or either improve through an opportunity. One way that I found that we can really help understand how we get to value very quickly is a technique of scoping, which is breadth versus depth. As business analysts, we really like the detail. We like going down. We feel comfortable in the detail. And what is really important that for us is to develop techniques that help us really go across the breadth. So we're trying to scope at a shallow level and go for breadth first before we understand the depth. This is essentially a component of business architecture. A great way, a great technique of delivering business architecture is around creating breadth and then going to depth. So we can still look at the what, we can still look at the how, we can still look at the who, we can still look at the where, we can still look at the when, and really importantly, we look at the why. And we do that through the breadth of the scope, not the depth of the scope. And if we apply this technique of going breadth first and then going depth, and only diving down to enough depth that gives us, or gives the team of stakeholders an understanding, enough understanding to move forward. And as we go forward, we can check that we've got the right breadth, the right scope. Have we understood this from an end-to-end perspective? This fits nicely with being able to discover while we're building. If we really understand the breadth first, it will allow us to build while we've got the width in mind, or the breadth in mind. We're able to start to deliver. Often stakeholders feel that they don't see progress on projects. And this is especially when it involves technology. So by using a technique of breadth and depth, business analysts can really allow us to scope and get a full end-to-end understanding. And sometimes we might even be able to prototype to get some feedback very quickly. In some cases, we may be able to build very quickly. And this will encourage our stakeholders to see something, to get involved. It's a very human response, is if we don't see something, we start to question it. So by seeing something, we're able to get heavily involved in it. So again, this breadth versus depth allows us to be able to discover and then only dive into the depth where we need to dive into, and we can create this continual process of being able to discover, refine, build, and collect some feedback as we go. And that's valuable. It's the value that comes back into the feedback. So another image here is just showing you how we can go from very top down to a lot lower level of detail, but actually doing some activity. So we're refining the requirements. We start with discovery, we're refining the requirements, and then we're building a component of those requirements and then gaining some feedback to make sure that we're achieving value back to the business. So putting this together, you can see a diagram here which really connects it all together, using design thinking, lean and agile together to really get us to concentrate on some of the value. We're able to leverage that value as we go. So again, this is about breadth, being able to discover, and then being able to do some form of prototyping to actually validate those requirements, to check back with our stakeholders to make sure that we are continuing to add value as we go. So how do we get breadth first, right? It's really important to have that some sort of understanding about what techniques do we use as a business analyst to really get our breadth. Well, what we're trying to concentrate on with our breadth is we're trying to concentrate on what products and services the organisation is delivering. To do this, really a simple technique is really value streaming. Right? Being able to value stream across the products and services will really allow us to see which of the products and services are the really critical products and services being delivered to the organisation. And it will actually help us to really fill in the gaps. I often find that if I put bunch of stakeholders into a room. And we often run internal projects, and every time we get together and we work as a group of stakeholders, we see that not everyone has the same perspective. Not everyone understands the end-to-end process that exists. So I always come back to this technique of let's go back and let's look at the end-to-end. What is actually happening from an end-to-end perspective? And I find that value streaming is a really great way of allowing us to really concentrate and get back to our products and services. What is really important is understanding that when we value stream, the customer may be internal or the customer may be external. And in actual fact, every value stream will have internal and external perspectives. But at the end of the day, we are delivering products and services to customers. And if you think back to when I talked about the counterfactual slide, is that I talked about that customer experience is really important. In this day and age, customer experience is really important. So the customer experience is important from an external perspective, but for them to have a really good customer experience externally, they must have an experience from internal people that will have an internal focus that enables them to get the delivery of those products and services in a really good experience. So you may need to optimize both external value streams but also internal value streams. And this is what's really important, is making there's a connection between customer experience and what actually happens internally to allow that product and service to be delivered to a customer. So if we have a look at that, what does that mean? Well, you can see from this slide that there's a typical customer value stream. You know, a customer comes in and they talk to sales, and then they go through purchasing. And often what happens is that there's functional silos. And as a business analyst, it's really important that we understand what's happening in this value stream, what's happening from the customer's perspective, and we really start to make sure that we're concentrating on where is the value with any changes that are being made, and how does that relate to the end-to-end process of the delivery of the products and services. So value streaming is a really important technique. Another one that that also can be useful is customer journey map. This customer journey map is, again, it can be from an internal perspective or it can be from an external perspective. And I think it's really important that, you know, there's an understanding of what is happening with the customer. In this day and age, there's a really big emphasis on data. Everyone's talking about big data. But one of the limitations with just focusing in on data is that you don't see the context of where the data is being used. So if you could connect the data with your customer journey, which you should actually be able to do, because in each of your customer journeys you will actually start to talk about class of data. If you can connect data with the customer journey, then there will be a connection between data and how the products and services are actually being delivered to a customer. So a customer journey map is often a really good way of being able to get that continual look from an end-to-end perspective. And one of the things is that it really starts to help, and stakeholders start to see it from an end-to-end perspective. Stakeholders often have a perspective which is very functional. Widening that functional viewpoint to something which is more end-to-end will create a more cohesive look at how products, services are going to be delivered. And it also will allow us to look at how can we improve how the customer experience is operating with those products and services. Again, using customer journey and value streaming allows us to go for breadth versus depth. We can summarize the experience or the journey really at a high level, and we can actually do that really quite fast. So within, a 2-hour workshop or a couple of days, we're actually really able to start to get a very broad base, and hopefully you do it from a pictorial base, so you can get people actually interacting with this and really understanding the end-to-end perspective. That will give us breadth, and we can stay away from the depth. The breadth is where we can really attack where does the value actually lie, and that's before jumping into the depth and we're getting too deep and we really haven't understood where the scope starts and the scope ends and what that means to how a customer is interacting with that organisation. So again, I encourage this technique of breadth versus depth, and we're trying to really get both of those acting together. So customer journey, again, it has similarities to process, but it's just a focus. It's a focus that is focusing in on the customer's experience. You're still going to have an as-is state. You should always start with an as-is state, and then you're going to move to how do we improve this? How are we going to take care of some issues, or better still, what are the opportunities? What can we do to leverage this differently to make it a better experience? And it would be better to concentrate on those things than concentrating on some aspects which are not going to provide value back to the organisation. So really what we're trying to do through this is, again, I'll reiterate it, it is about breadth rather than depth. It's about starting from a high level and then drilling down into a lower level of detail. So when we look at this, we're really going to start with a very, very high, what does business need? What are we starting off with? Then we're going to break that down into, well, where does that sit within the organisation? What are the products and services that really sit within the organisation, and how are they being delivered to customers? And then we're going to look at, well, what are the value streams that allow us to deliver those? And a lot of those may be cross-functional. They may not sit just within one set part of the organisation. Then using a customer journey is a really, really good technique, because, again, it will take away from a very internal focus to more an external focus. And another thing that I've found with a customer journey is that it will immediately start to go across functional silos. So it is from an end-to-end perspective. And I think this is really important, because it starts getting stakeholders to think wider than just what their needs are. It's really focusing back on, well, what is the main purpose of our organisation? Well, it's to connect with customers, and we're delivering products and services to those customers, so let's think from an end-to-end perspective. And then breaking that down from a customer journey should be broken down now into a series of user stories, and they will then describe some of the details, so we get down into more of a functional level, but that's describing the information that is connected to the end-to-end perspective of delivering products and services. Often Many projects start with just a whole series of user stories and a bunch of stakeholders in a room. What do you want? That's always an avenue for, well, what I've seen is that stakeholders often don't understand an end-to-end perspective. So using techniques such as value streams and customer journeys, a really great way of getting us to focus in on an end-to-end perspective rather than just simply describing a series of features that might improve issues but don't really look at bigger opportunities that can be solved. So, changing focus of business analysis. Hopefully we've talked about some different techniques that we can use to try to help create shared understanding among stakeholders that really concentrate on value. What we're trying to do as a business analyst is really just do just enough business analysis. This is about always concentrating on value. If you make value the key objective, then time and risk is associated against the value. If we decide to spend too much time on something, it may actually might lower the risk, but it also might lower the value. And then if we don't spend enough time on differing outputs from business analysis, then there's often a high risk. Right? So we've got to get that balance right. It's about understanding how much time do we spend, and then how much value are we concentrating on to make sure that we're minimizing the risk. We'll never totally reduce the risk, but it's about minimizing the risk but creating the best value. And I think the best way of doing that is continually talking to your stakeholders, continually talking about the value of what is being delivered. Often I see projects focusing in on deliverables, on tasks, on activity, that somehow task activities, thick documents are where the value is. In some cases, there may be great value in that, but it's important to always be asking the question, how much value? How much is going to get used? How much do we need as a team to make sure that we're just getting enough? Throwing that all away and doing nothing is high risk. But concentrating on the value that we can provide and constantly going back to the value, no matter what delivery methodology that you use, it's about business analysis value. It's concentrating on how to extract the most in the fastest, quickest possible time with reducing the risk to something failing. Now, that's not going to say that there is not going to be hiccups along the way, but it's probably better than over-engineering or under-engineering your business analysis. So this is really about just enough business analysis. So what I would do is, again, re-emphasize that it's about not throwing away all your tools in your toolbox. It's about refocusing some of your tools around looking at value, looking at how can we use our tools and techniques that we've developed as a business analyst to constantly provide value back to our stakeholders and keep refining that technique so we're adding value business analysis rather than task-driven business analysis. So thanks very much for your time today. and I'd just like to open it up to any questions.
We do have a couple of questions, Tim. One was at the very beginning you talked about task versus value-driven. And the question is, how do you blend task with time and value? So in a situation where your stakeholder's task is time-bound and to give value, you can't meet the stakeholder's time, how would you manage such a situation?
So I just, what I'd probably rephrase that back to the stakeholder is what value are they looking for? So it's about quantifying the value that they're looking for and then talking to them about that if it's being time boxed and you don't think that you're going to achieve their value in that time, then it's about trying to work out what is the critical driver around that, because you basically can't have both things. It's a matter of if they're describing a value and there's a time associated to that value, then you're either going to change some of where they're hanging on to the value or you're going to change the time. But it's impossible to have high amounts of value and do that within an impossible time. So I guess my help around that would be get your stakeholders talking and articulating about the value and the outcome that they're looking for.
Okay, that sort of answers part of the next question that I have. And I just want to remind everybody, if you do have any questions, you can enter your questions into the question box on your GoToWebinar panel. So Tim, the next question is on, so a lot of organizations can tend to be task driven. So this may be a switch for them culturally. So how would you sell the switching from task-oriented from being task-oriented to value-oriented in an organization which is so strongly focused on the tasks?
Yeah, look, that's a hard road, and again, I'd probably suggest that again focus back on the value. A lot of organisations often can't see where the value is. So as a business analyst, it's great to pictorially show them. And if you can articulate that from a end-to-end perspective and really try to show them where their value sits, it's a lot easier to influence them. So to give you an example of this is that worked with an organisation that were working with a 4-year program of work, and the program of work was really associated around product 2 and 3 of their 3 products that they sold to customers. So they had product 1, product 2 and product 3. And when having a look at their program of work, I noticed that all of their program of work was around product 2 and product 3. And what we did was just had a look at, well, where does the value sit within the organisation? And we found out that product 1 was actually 50% of their revenue, product 2 was 25% of their revenue, and product 3 was another 25%. And so we saw that the program of work was all around product 2 and 3, which was only 50% of their work, of their revenue. So by showing them that they're doing nothing with the product that is their highest revenue generator, tended to get them to start to see that, hang about, what we're doing, the tasks that we're doing with this program maybe are not where it's best for the business. And we started to see a bit of a shift heading towards other projects that were associated with product one. So I guess it's around using one of the core competencies in the BA box, which is around influencing skills. It's difficult, it's step by step by step, but just remember that it's about leading a horse to water. It's not about forcing it to drink. You've got to influence and show where the value is. And if you often, most human beings will see value, but it sometimes takes a bit of effort to get them to see it.
Perfect. We have a quiet audience today, so those were the 2 questions that I have, but give you any opportunity to provide anything else that you would like around the breadth going broad as opposed to deep, because that tends to be what business analysts like to do, is to dive into the details. Do you have any suggestions on how to stop from or not diving as deep and keep to the breadth?
Yeah, I think one of the ways to do this is preparation, preparation, preparation. So before engaging your stakeholders, make sure that you understand enough, and again, it comes back to just enough. Understand enough of the breadth. Understand most of the activities. The first thing is really understand what the products and services are of the organisation. So, before you've got to have that really a good understanding around what is this organisation actually doing. Once you've understood these are the products that are, or services that are being delivered, then really understand the patterns that sit underneath that will make up the value streams. And if you can understand what those patterns are, then that allows you to really become an expert in the breadth. And you can achieve the breadth very, very quickly, and just have the confidence that you will understand the depth as you go through. But what's really important is get people to understand and get them corralled so that you can really concentrate on the breadth of the activity rather than diving down into the depth of that. Remember that it's the domain or business SME that's really got to know the depth. It's not you as the business analyst, because as a business analyst you're not accountable for delivering the value stream to the customer. You're accountable for the business analysis activities, not accountable for the day-to-day business as usual activity within the organisation.
Great. I have a question regarding the end-to-end analysis. What are the limits of the end-to-end analysis? Or are there any limits?
Well, I don't think there are any limits. I think you've got to start wide with any organisation. You've got to start with the value chain. It's about trying to understand the full breadth of the organisation and then dropping down as fast as you can to where your stakeholders want to concentrate on. But make sure that you're able to bring all that context with you to make sure that the stakeholders have thought about it from an end-to-end perspective. So you've got to start off at a level 0 or a level 1 of a value chain, and then you've got to drop down and really understand where you're dropping it down to concentrate on what issue are they trying to solve, or what opportunity are they trying to take advantage of. Because if they're not if you haven't got that perspective and your stakeholders don't have that perspective, then you could be just doing something that's not really adding value to the organisation. So again, start broad and try to drop down as fast as possible to actually start to engage your stakeholders into something being done and being delivered, because that's how you really can show your value without just talking about, the value. It's about actually showing and demonstrating how you can add value to the organisation as fast as possible.
Great. I have a question regarding the time versus risk diagram. So I don't know if you want to rewind the presentation a little bit. There was just wanted more understanding of it. One of the questions was regarding not understanding how the lower bubble was high risk while in the left area of the risk line. So they're just having trouble understanding the output of that diagram.
Sorry, they should be round the other way. No, sorry, that's correct. So where you've got high risk is that you haven't spent much time on it, so you haven't actually got too much depth of it, whereas, and that's going to be higher risk. So what I should have done is on the bottom one, should have put high risk down here, and lower risk where the lower value is. So the greater amount of time that is taken, it will enable us to reduce our risk, but we're probably going to provide lower value back to the organisation, whereas less time taken is going to be higher risk. Right? We might get stuff done faster, but it's probably going to be at a higher risk. Okay, hopefully I've explained that. I should have probably labelled the axes a little bit better.
Great, thank you. Again, going back to the culture, question is regarding going from task to value driven. Is this going to require a complete organizational cultural switch?
That's a good question. Some people would argue, and again, that's a hard question to answer because different organisations work culturally different, and you can even see some patterns within certain industries. They work different, and it also probably depends upon the size of the organisation too. A smaller organisation may be more aligned to value driven rather than task driven. Some management within organisations is very much task driven rather than value driven. So all those things will vary. I think that value driven within organisations is really, really important. I think that it's something that if organisations have a really good strategic plan, then and they can articulate clearly where their value lies, then they're going to be more of a dynamic, changing organisation that is going to align itself to the customer and the customer experience. I think that is what's going to happen in the future. It's less around disruption, it's more around customers having an ability to be able to see value and change to value and make sure that they understand their customers well enough that they can change with their customers. And I think that that driver is going to, that's the driver that's actually going to be driving organisations over the next 20 years, 25 years. And I think that we will start seeing organisations start to pick up on that. So I think the success rate of being able to influence those organisations will become much greater to a business analyst. It's still hard work and it will not happen overnight. It's about just chipping away, and getting organisations to understand that they need to concentrate on that value rather than just simply completing a task.
So,
having said that, you may need to complete a task to add the value, but the concentration should be on the value.
So in that way then, do you think it would even mean that businesses need to reevaluate their business strategy?
Well, hopefully organisations, evaluate their strategy continually. I think you need to go back and, that should be part of an annual cycle is to revisit their strategy and whether they have a 3-year or a 5-year plan, you need to continually go back and make sure that there is some evaluation against that strategy. But I do think that that's becoming more important to organisations, is that there is a clear strategy and that there's a continual refresh of that strategy.
Perfect. I think
I guess that's the important thing that a business analyst can help with too, is it's often that organisations can't see the wood for the trees, and it's that skill of a business analyst which helps them to start to see the wood for the trees, about that breadth rather than depth, and the end-to-end perspective are perspectives that business analysts can bring that I don't think any other profession or role really brings to the table. So I think that's the real value add that a business analyst can bring.
Absolutely. And with that, the perfect way to end the webinar, actually. I'm going to thank you very much, Tim, for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us this evening, this morning, or this afternoon, whatever time it is for you. Just a reminder that if you would like to revisit this webinar, it will be posted on the IIBA website within 5 business days of this live presentation, both with the slide presentation and the recording of the webinar. So again, thank you so much, Tim. We hope to see you soon, and thank you to you all.